Hello. Thanks all for coming again. How's that? I'm Kelly. I'm from Knit Swag. And as always, every week, I'm here to talk about number knitting, my favorite knitting book, published in 1952, based on Virginia Woods Bellamy's patented hand knitting method. And so we're going to be talking about garter stitch and some knitting techniques. I always like to throw in a few of my other favorite knitting books when the topic is related to garter stitch, because this whole thing is garter stitch. So thanks again for coming. This is my fourth time doing a live, which is awesome. Thanks to you for showing up and for watching the video again. In the last couple of weeks, we had talked about doing a knit along, and the consensus, there's about, I don't know, probably like 7 or 8 different blanket patterns in here. And the consensus, hey, Bob, welcome. Thanks for coming. We had a small vote because not many people were there on the, I don't know, week 1 or week 2. And we decided on the tropical leaf car throw. The original one, Bellamy described in different shades of green, hence the name tropical leaf car throw. I think she probably went through her stash and hadn't found she had a whole bunch of green yarn, and so then she designed this. But I don't have that much green yarn, and I'm not a huge fan of different shades of green, but I like pinks and purples very, very much. And so these are the colors I chose. And I thought I'd bring along mine so you could see the progress. I think I've been knitting on it for 2 weeks now. And I wrote on here how far I've gotten. So this was I think week 1 was right there. And then week 2, I made it up to here. So I'm like, gosh, almost a third of the way done. And usually blankets, if I knit in them a lot, they take me about 3 weeks. But our knit along is going until, hey, Karen, is going until the end of February, or longer if you want. But that's kind of like the time that, we'll be covering it on this show. Is this a show? I guess so. Anyway, so I had chosen size 8 needles. In hindsight, I probably should have gone a little bit looser, because the gauges, hey, Dion, welcome. The gauges in number knitting were generally very, very loose compared with today's gauges. Like, she would knit lace weight yarn or baby weight yarn on size 11 needles, which is like the first time a knitter, even an experienced knitter, does that, and they try to follow the pattern exactly like for one of my test knits. They're puzzled by working baby yarn on size 11 needles, and like, of course, like why would you not be puzzled by that? So I normally would knit this like on size, I don't know, 11s or 12s or 13s or whatever, but I chose 8 probably because I was tired, and that's what the book said. But this is how far I've gotten. I know a lot of people have, they've got the interchangeable needle sets that can go like really long. And I actually have one of those. And I find that I hardly ever use it. I like fixed circulars, and usually about 24 inches, this is maybe 30 inches, is about the size that I generally go, and I just jam it all on there. So Dion asked, why such large needles? I think if you look at the cover of the book, a simple to learn method that is easier, faster, and cheaper than ordinary knitting. So she has a whole section in the front. She developed this method like in the 30s during the Depression, when like everybody was broke and materials were hard to come by. And so she had to figure out a way to clothe her children. I guess she just had one, but to clothe her son using as much to make the fabric as warm as possible, and with using less yarn. Hi, Granny Squared. Thank you. I like the color too. And so she, and this is in the introduction in the book, she has a whole kind of story about how she would go to the yarn shop, and the instruction, the popular thought of the day was to, knit the yarn very, very tightly and on very small needles, so that it would really, really, it would hold its shape really well. And she just didn't like that method. She thought it was, like, too restrictive, and she wanted something that was, like, more loose and drapey, and so she just began experimenting with garter stitch and using big needles just to see what would happen, and it worked, and she was really, really thrilled with it. Um, so let me show you. This is a this is one of the patterns from the book, and it's like baby weight yarn. It's a 2-ply, light fingering. It's very, very I knit it on size 11 needles, but like you can see me through this. And it's a lovely fabric when you knit really loosely. I would caution you against doing it with superwash wool, because something in the superwash process, it strips off all the scales, which means you can machine wash it, but then it also, like, when you do wash it, it's like it like grows exponentially. And so if you're going to use superwash wool, I would use like the recommended needle gauge size that's like on the ball band, but you can get away with doing non-superwash wool on way, way bigger needles than you might think that you could. So I, for some reason, decided to go with number 8s. I probably should have gone with 12s on this, but it's a nice fabric. It'll keep me really, really warm. So I'm curious, for those of you who have started your tropical leaf car throw, are you doing it according to the stitch count in the book? And I don't know if I've talked a whole lot yet about how you can adjust your stitch count based on like the size that you want, because most patterns, most modern patterns, they don't necessarily, like, not that I can think of, they don't give you a way to just like make it bigger, make it smaller, other than by using bigger, smaller needles. But as far as like adjusting the stitch count so that it's what you want, I don't think many other patterns do that, as far as I know. And so, to my knowledge, she is still the only, and I could be wrong, I don't know all the knitting designers out there, but to my knowledge, Bellamy is still well, and for me, but my stuff is based on hers. She's the only one that uses the concept of the graph paper, and you as a knitter drawing out, whoop, to put that back later when I need to talk about that page, using the concept of graph paper and a box number. And so I know some of you are familiar with the concept of a box number. Are there any of you that aren't familiar with the concept of a box number? Because that's a term that she invented and I haven't seen used anywhere else. It's kind of foundational to the number knitting method, in that each box on the graph paper represents a certain number of stitches. And so let me find one that's a little bit easier to see. Here we go. So this is mulberry bush Afghan. And in all of her patterns, there's going to be this little symbol on the bottom. Box number equals 9. And the box number, it's going to vary from pattern to pattern. But then if you look up here at the instructions, let's say, it says, it gives you your yarn, it gives you what needles to use, and then it tells you what the gauge is, and then the chart. So chart, it says 1 box equals 9 stitches. So 4 boxes wide is 9 times 4 is 36. And if you look at each of these mitered squares, each of them is 1, 2, 3, 4 boxes wide by 4 boxes tall. And so this would be 36 plus 36. And the beauty of this is that, let's say you want a bigger blanket, but you want to keep kind of the same proportions. You could either use a bigger needle size, or you could simply change your stitch count. So instead of box equals 9, you could change it to box equals 10, and that would give you 40 by 40. Or you could change it to box equals 12, or you could downsize it. You could have the box number equals 2 or 3. And so if it was 3, it would be 3 times 4, so it would be 12 by 12. And so all of the patterns in number knitting have got that box number and the associated, section in the chart that tells you what that box number is for, which is really cool for just being able to like resize the patterns. Now, sometimes if you wanted to resize things, let me see if I can find one of her sweater patterns that has this. Sometimes when she resizes the sweater pattern, she will, here it is. So this is let me show you a picture of it. This is the linen blouse, right? And so if you are, according to this, one box equals 3 stitches or ridges for a small, and then one box equals 3.5 stitches or ridges for a large. And so simply by changing the proportion, your box number, it's going to proportionally scale up or down your design. And you can still use the same chart, same instructions. It's just a different stitch count. And yeah, I think that's pretty brilliant. So one thing I studied a little bit of fashion design. Like, I don't know, I took one class in college, and it was a combination fashion, I think it was like a fashion history garment construction class. And we just kind of dealt very, very briefly with the idea of pattern grading. And I always thought it was interesting. So you've got a small person, maybe she's like, 5 foot tall and weighs 100 pounds. And then you have, progressively bigger people. So then maybe you go up to someone that's like, 5'9" and like, I don't know, 185 pounds. I don't know what those numbers should be. But so the proportion, and I guess this depends on the body type, the proportion, it like scales up, right? So if you just change the box number, you could scale the whole thing up. But what I find really interesting is in the stores, the larger sizes, they also generally have longer sleeves. So like if someone is 5'4" and they weigh 120 pounds, and you also have someone that's 5'4" but weighs maybe like 200 pounds, like they're probably going to have the same length of arms, but one of them will need a much bigger size. And so I wonder if like in commercial patterns, like I guess that's why there's plus sizing. But I just think the whole idea of like scaling up proportionally, it's interesting the way that she dealt with it. Because she doesn't, in her sweaters in the book, she doesn't offer any options for like adjusting sleeve length. I mean, I don't think so. I haven't read the whole book. I just learned that today. I found a new section, and I've been going through this book pretty rigorously for 7 years, and I just found a new section today. I'm like, how in the world did I miss that? Anyway, so if you've got your pattern, and you can honestly just work from this chart. You don't even need the instructions. If you know how to read this chart, you can just work from this. And so for those of you who are watching this video after the end of January 2023, when the pattern download has expired, you can just screen chat this. So I know someone will do that. All right, there's your free pattern in perpetuity. So have any of you started your tropical leaf car throw yet? I know Karen has. I know I've actually had a fair number of people download this. I think I got the notification today that there was 23. So that's exciting. Maybe they'll come to one of my videos. Okay, so if you don't want to make a big version of this, I don't know how big this thing is going to be, like 4 feet wide. Karen says, I wish I had made it a tad bigger. What you can do, Karen, on these borders here, I think it's 2 squares wide. Yeah, it's 2 squares wide. And so if the box number is 4, originally it calls for like, so this would be like 8 ridges. You can just make your borders along the edge here bigger. Yeah. And so you can have a thicker border, and there you go, bigger blanket. But I was thinking about another way to make, because if you're like me and like most knitters, you have a lot of hand knitted blankets, and there's some Like all the hand knitted blankets that I have that are 100% wool, non-superwash, I don't give them away. I keep them. Or I give them to a trusted family member with a stern warning and written instructions. Don't put this in the washing machine. But most of the time I keep all my hand knitted blankets, as you can see from this growing collection of stuff I've never given anyone. So different, I thought it'd be fun to talk about some different ways, like if you wanted to make this pattern, but like don't have enough yarn to put it in a like a blanket form, I thought I would show you a couple of ideas. And I've brought this book out. Where is it? I brought this book out before. This is called Woolly Thoughts, and this is written by a couple of math teachers in the UK. They're married. Well, the wife passed, but they're married. They're math teachers, and they developed this modular knitting method. I think totally independent of this. They developed this as a way to teach math to children, and it's brilliant. It's amazing. It's got some differences, some similarities to number knitting, but I think their approach is pretty neat. All right, so let me find the pictures. So this book, I think, was written in the 80s. I think it was in the 80s. And if you remember sweater fashion from the 80s, it was a thing to behold. Here we go. Oh yeah. And I don't know, maybe 80s sweater fashion is coming back, because when I look at pictures of folks at Rhinebeck or whatever, this sort of thing is not uncommon. And that's awesome. I would rather wear it on my lap as opposed to on my back. But I think what's interesting about these ideas here is that a lot of this book is about empowering you as a designer to design garments that, the way that you want to, as opposed to just like following the step-by-step instructions of someone else. And so this whole thing is about empowering you and educating you. And they have some really interesting, stuff in here. So if you wanted to, you could take something like this, and you could add sleeves and make a front, make a back, add sleeves, and call it a sweater. I know that proportions, because some people are decidedly square-shaped and others are decidedly not square-shaped. So depending on like your figure, DJ says we need to bring those sweaters back. Yes. I might wear them if they were more muted colors, but these are kind of, they're a little wild for me personally. But if you like super baggy stuff, and I think with the young folks today, that's coming back. So if you either have like a boxy figure, or you like to wear boxy shaped clothes, you could totally, take one of these and turn it into a sweater. Another fun thing to do with this would be like, if you change the box number to, I don't know, something smaller, and you put like 4 of them together, so you made like a quilt pattern, and then you could, and maybe do different colors. That might be kind of fun. And since we're talking about knitted quilts, there was, I think it came out last year, and I bought it as soon as it came out. Oh, Dion asked why such large needles. Yes, I did talk about that already. That's because Bellamy was raising her son through the Depression, and she was trying to clothe him for less money. And if you use thin yarn on big needles, if you use thinner wool, specifically wool, and animal fibers on big needles, doing garter stitch, the ridges of the garter stitch, and the looseness of the fabric, they're going to make a lot more air in there, and that air is what traps the warmth. And she was very concerned about being able to keep her children warm, because she lived in Maine, keep the kids warm while not having a whole lot of money to work with. So that was the premise behind the large needles. And she liked the loose fabric, which I do too. Um, oh yeah, your daughter makes boxy sweaters. They're comfortable. I will admit they are super comfortable. So this is another fun one if you like geometric knitting. So the description on the back of this, Margaret Halsman, blah blah blah, following a career as an engineer at Bell Labs and Jet Propulsion Laboratory. She's a full-time knitting designer now. So so her whole thing is, if you look at the different kinds of patterns on the back, it's all like quilt inspired, which is kind of along the same lines of this tropical leaf car throw. And so she gives you, it's not just like number knitting, because number knitting is based strictly on 45 and 90 degree angles. So to make the 45-degree angle, you have a double decrease, and the 90-degree angle is like no decrease, it's just up and down. But what's interesting about this one is she doesn't just stick with 45 and 90-degree angles. She does all kinds of other angles as well, which I think is really interesting. Like, look at this one. It's like a, I don't know, backgammon pattern, or what is it? I don't play. Oh, it's called Horizons. Yeah. Anyway, she uses different angles, a lot of the same techniques that Bellamy did, but her angles are different. But she still has the same idea with like the numbered units and telling you which direction to knit them in. And hey, Helen, welcome, welcome. So I think that if you like that sort of thing, this is a phenomenal book. If I had a coffee table, like this would be my coffee table book, but we don't have a coffee table. So angles. Let's talk about angles some more. Back to Woolly Thoughts. So because this was written by mathematicians, there's a whole section on the back. Do you guys remember the in like junior high school math, or high school geometry or whatever, the Pythagorean theorem, a squared plus b squared equals c squared? I have a hard time when I'm working on new designs. I had a really hard time remembering that, because it's been like 40 years since junior high, right? Anyway, not 40, 35. I don't know. It's been a long time since I took a math class. Thank God. So Karen's husband teaches math. And so when I have a really like easy for him, hard for me math question, I just text Karen. So thanks, Karen. So what's interesting is that on Woolly Thoughts, there's on page 105, there's this whole chart at the bottom that tells you, like, if you have a right angle and your side is this, one measurement is this and one measurement is this, like what the diagonal should be, which is awesome. I love that. And it took me a while to figure out the ratio. Here it says the ratio between the side of the square and its diagonal measurement is always 1 to 1.4. So if like these two sides are 5, this is always going to be 7. And so there's some math theory in this book, which would, like, if you really want to take your geometric knitting to the next level, this is a fabulous resource to have, because it has different angles in it. And I think even has like definitions of mathematical vocabulary, like hypotenuse, adjacent, sine, cosine, tangent. I'd have to reread all those, because if I had a quiz on those things now, I would fail. I would totally fail. And also page 110, this is gold. I haven't started using this yet, but I'm working on a project now that's just, it has got me stumped. And it's one of my own designs. I'm like, why do I keep screwing this up? I can't figure it out. Okay, so Woolly Thoughts, page 110, it tells you, like, if you want to get certain angles, it tells you like how often you need to increase or decrease. Right? That's awesome. That's totally awesome. So get yourself a copy of this to go along with your number knitting patterns, because I know that these are, following this, but they build on this. And the concepts that she presents um, you can, take the designs to new levels if you know how to get anything other than a 45-degree angle, which is stuck. I don't remember calculus. I never even took calculus. The farthest I got was, I think it was a 300 level math class in college, and it was called problem solving. And there's about three things I remember from that class. And one of them was there was like a page in the book that talked about MC Escher. And do any of you know who MC Escher is? He did like the fishes that morph into birds flying over a landscape, like all kinds of weird mathematical, like interlocking patterns. And that's what I remember from problem solving class was I just would like trace out those pictures and try to come up with new ideas. Oh, tessellations. Oh, that's a good word. Ooh, tessellation. I'm going to write that one down. Love that word. Tessellations. Escher is very cool. Yeah. All right. So another thing you could do with this, like if you wanted to make this smaller, so you don't want a 4-foot long blanket, you don't have to be constrained. And I just learned this today. You don't have to be constrained to an even number there. Like for the first time, like 25 minutes ago, when I was looking through this book, I noticed that in one of the patterns, Bellamy had said a small was the box number was 3, but a large, the box number was 3.5. Like that's the first time I've ever seen that. So you can use percentages of your box number. I would stick to like 0.25 or 5. It'll just make your math a little bit easier. I tried to come up with like a stitch calculator recently, and the box number was like 2.36, and I kept screwing up the pattern every which way. I just finished number 3 test of that pattern, and I still can't get the math right. So if you're going to change your box number, I'd probably keep it in like, quarter or half-inch increments, or whole numbers. But I probably would recommend staying away from like, 0.57 or 0.65 or something. That might be a little frustrating. Okay, so I found something new in this book that I had never seen before. And as you know, I spent, years ago, I spent weeks scanning this whole thing in. I run optical character recognition on it. I've done bookmarks to this, and I relayed out the whole thing in my publishing program. And apparently, starting on page 249, I've never read it. So it's 249 starts the section To the Adventuresome Knitter. And remember, this whole book was based on a correspondence course. And so I don't know, that would be awesome if someday we could find like the actual correspondence course documents in some little old lady's attic or something from her grandma. That would be great. Probably not, but we could hold out hope. But so this whole thing was a correspondence course, and it was based on the idea like she would send out lessons. You got lesson 1, lesson 2, lesson 3 and 4, and then at the end, probably for the final lesson of your course, your correspondence course, it is to the adventurous knitter, and she talks about the concept again of graph paper and the box number, throws in some family stories. Oh, Bob says, if you want to knit this in fingering weight yarn, what size needles would you use? It all depends. Fingering weight, superwash, I think a size 5 or 6 would be nice. Non-superwash, I could go up to like an 8. Depends on how loose you want the fabric. And it depends on the structure of the yarn. Some yarns are like really lofty. Some are very slick. Like this is like a mohair blend. And that's why I have something on underneath it, because it's a mohair blend and I can't let it touch my skin. But it depends on the yarn that you're using. Like if you're using big box store yarn, baby/fingering yarn, I'd maybe go with like a size 4 if it's like acrylic or something. You can get away with looser knitting if it's wool with a little bit of grip to it. Okay, so for the adventuresome The Adventurous Knitter. She talks about the box number again. She talks about graph paper, talks about gauge. She has, again, her seven shapes that all of her designs are based on. And remember, they're like 45 and 90-degree angles. And then she gives you instructions for like how to draw your own designs on graph paper. Like you should start with the main elements and then, you know, fill in the background squares. And it's amazing. And it's like 15 pages long of ideas. And what I think is really one of the interesting things about this is she has some examples of quilts in the back. And do any of you notice the angles on that? They're decidedly not 45-degree angles. These ones are. So this could be knit using number knitting techniques, but this one is not 45-degree angles. And so this one, you'd have to use some of the math from this book. But here's where it gets interesting to me, is that she talks a lot about stretch. Like, you know, if you knit vertically versus if you've got the miter in the middle, and circular stretch and all the way stretch. So here's the thing that I've never noticed before. When she's asking you like a series of questions for things like how to analyze your own design and know if it's a good one. Have you successfully avoided the 3 hazards of the game whenever possible? Number 1, turned flat edges inside. Now, if you don't, let me see. Okay, here's an example. Oh, this would be a better. Here we go. So in number knitting, the term flat, let's see, where's the bottom? The term flat edge refers to the cast on and bind off edge. And the rising edge refers to like the chain stitches on the side when you're knitting up. And so she recommends that you not turn the flat edges to the inside. And the second one is, have you let yarn run from unit to unit? And I've never seen that discussed anywhere else in the book. She talks about carrying the yarn. I suspect she means like if you were to float, you know, like a Fair Isle or stranded colorwork from like one to the next, it just floated a few stitches, not a big deal. I think that's what she's saying not to do, which is, you know, that's fine. And the third one she recommends avoiding is avoiding inside joinings. Now, do any of you know what an inside joining is? Let's see if I can, there it is. I'm going to bring up the chart for this little placemat. So that'll make a little more sense if I show you the chart. And I agree, inside joinings are a pain. Okay, so this is a checkerboard design table mat, and I'll show you the knitted one here in a moment. And you can see that the number of the units indicates the order in which they are to be knit. So you have unit number 1, you're going to cast on here and knit up. And then, so the flat edge is on top. And then for unit number 2, you're going to pick up here and knit that away. And for unit 3, you will pick up here and knit that away. And unit 4, you pick up here and knit out. Unit 5, you pick up, where is it? There we go. You're going to pick up here and knit up. And then unit number 6 is a little wonky because you pick up and you actually have to join it to unit number 1 as you're knitting. And I think it even says JK there. So you're going to join by knitting. And I believe There's two places that you have to join on the inside. One is from 6 to 1, so JK, and then unit 5 to unit 2, you have to JP, which is join by purling. Let me show you what that looks like. So this line of stitches here and that line of stitches, one of them was joined by purling and one of them was joined by knitting. And you can see that it's like an extra little kind of a lumpy bumpy ridge there compared with how clean the line is when you pick up. And so in her adventuresome section, to the adventurous knitter, she recommends against where is it? Against inside joinings, because you have to either join by knitting or join by purling, and it doesn't look the same. Now, I don't know if any of you have gotten to the point on your tropical, well, I guess you maybe the tropical leaf car throw, right? So you're gonna cast on, according to the original chart, you're gonna cast on and then knit unit 1, and then, yeah, you're going to go up, and then you're going to fill in these triangles. But it says to join by knitting, I think. Yep, join by knitting, JK. And what that does is it's going to leave like a thicker line right there, which is fine. Just be aware that if you do it that way, then it might look a little bit different than you're expecting. What I did, and I talked about this briefly last week, was instead of doing like 1, 2, 3, 4, and then filling in the triangles, what I did was to cast on the whole bottom edge all at once. And I'm just doing intarsia on this edge. So when I get to the pink and the purple, I'll just hook them together in the back, twist them, and I just work this all as a single unit. And it does, normally the units, she has them outlined in like a chain stitch edging. And obviously, I mean, I haven't figured out a way to make a chain stitch edging on the interior line of a unit. Maybe that'll come later. I don't know. But if you don't like the idea of join by knitting or join by purling, having an interior join, this is a nice way to go. And she talked about that the earlier, I guess it's like the 30% point of the book, one of the first blankets. It's called window star blanket. And she has you do the little star, not as like a single unit, but like a square, and then all the little triangles are on the outside. And then she has you come in later and fill it in with the background color. When I made this, which I don't have in my cabinet full of treasures, because I actually did give it away, but it was superwash. So what I did was, instead of working all these separately, I did the same idea where I just knitted a mitered square and just did intarsia around the center point. So yeah, that's that's what I have about that. I did want to show you, and I think I showed this for the first time last week, this little number. So my first one, I made this based on this is an example of the Tarzetto shawl that I designed. Still haven't told anyone about it except for you guys, because I'm bad at publishing stuff. No, I'm bad at promoting. Great at publishing. I just keep it a secret. So I'll show you this again in case you're new here. This is a fun one, my design, not Virginia's. Virginia being the woman who wrote Number Knitting. So it's got a divided triangle in the center, and then you go to the bottom, like you start with the dark blue, and you knit, yep, you're gonna knit a bunch of trapezoids, or I guess they're like trapezoids on one side and flat on the other, and then you flip it and you knit that side. Actually, light purple, dark blue, and then you flip it again and you knit the light blue stripes. And so the whole thing is based on 45 and 90-degree angles. But what's interesting about it is that you're joining on the bias here. And so the math, how I talked about earlier about how the math is like 1.4 ratio, that is the math that's calculated in here. And so I made this shawl. I have it in, I don't know, I probably made 6 of them trying to figure the math out. And then I decided, like, what would happen if I like folded it up into a hat? And so then I made this, and I showed this last week. My math was wrong because I probably grabbed the wrong needle size, and I don't gauge swatch. Like a good knitter, I wing it. So I was like, this is not going to fit. So it's kind of toddler size. It kind of fits. It kind of fits, but it's still a little wonky. The math is not quite right. It looks really like the striping is interesting, but it's got kind of like, I'm just not sure what to do about that. So this was attempt number 1. And here I guessed wrong in the math again. And then I came up with this one. I added ribbing on this one. And this is the dog fur yarn that I spun from my dad's dog fur, and some other bulky weight single. And I guessed wrong in the math again. It's a little big. I know I have a small head, but so I'm still working on these angles. And I have a pom-pom. I guess it's a yarn bowl. I keep pom-poms in it. This is from a guy named Chad Souder. I'll put his link down below. I think it's yeah, it's spalded maple. And he does wood turning, and it's got the little, it's a yarn bowl, but I keep pom-poms in it. So if I had, maybe that would make it look better. I'm debating. So this is attempt number 2. Attempt number 3, I finished about, I don't know, 5:30. I was on a road trip on Friday, and I had 8 hours of drive time in the passenger seat, which I love, because then I can just knit. And, unless it's, we leave before dawn and we, get back before dark, which we did. But even still, I got like 6 solid hours of knitting time, because I don't drive. Well, I do, but not when my husband's around, because he drives, because he doesn't like my driving. But anyway, I had 6 hours of knitting. And so I tried again, and I grabbed my needles, I grabbed my yarn, I grabbed my spreadsheet, and then I went for it. And then I get there, I'm knitting, and I realize I brought the wrong size needles, but I just had to go with it. So I messed up the math again. And so I made this, which is, again, it's ginormous. It's even bigger than the green one. But I adjusted it so that it's, I guess this one is kind of slouchy, probably because it's fingering weight yarn. I adjusted the pattern so that it's now got this, like, I did a 2x2 ribbing around the base of it to help hold it on a little better. And then I did a tubular bind off. Have any of you ever done a tubular bind off? I always have to watch a video whenever I do it, but I love it. I love tubular bind off, because a regular bind off, and I don't even know what it's called, a traditional bind off, where you like, knit 2 stitches and bring the first one over the second one. Like, what is that called other than bind off? I don't know. I just call it bind off. But I find that those sometimes, the regular bind off, it can be just a little too tight, especially like around a head. And so I'm finding I really like the tubular bind off for ribbing. So I did this one, and maybe I need a hat blocker or something, because it's got, the shape is a little bit weird. I think a pom-pom would help, but I also think some extra crown shaping, because it's just got the crown shaping on the 2 sides from where the folds are. But I'm thinking like crown shaping here and here would kind of help make it not so pointed. Karen likes the Elizabeth Zimmerman sewn bind off. Yes, I have done that as well. That one I think works really well on garter stitch. I haven't tried that with ribbing. I should probably do that. The tubular bind off is also a sewn bind off, and it's worked differently if you do it on circular needles versus straights. I always have to watch a video on that. I like Roxanne Richardson videos because she just clarifies things so well, and she's like right to the point. So I watch her videos whenever I need help with anything because she's she's got videos on everything. Dion says it works good on socks too. Yes, I would imagine it does. I knit about 5 pairs of socks back in 2002, and then I decided I didn't like knitting socks because they didn't fit right. I didn't give myself enough time, but I can feel the stitches under my feet, and my feet are super sensitive. So I actually buy all my socks. I don't knit any socks anymore except for Christmas stockings, but like I don't wear those. So all these failed, well, I don't know if they're failed, they're educational experiences, hat attempts. It like I don't know. This normally wouldn't be my style. It's super warm. I guess if it was like 10 degrees outside, this probably would be my style because it's super warm. But like the whole idea of a hat being like a certain aesthetic, like it has to be round and maybe the pom pom, like and this is not like this doesn't fit a store-bought hat aesthetic in any way. But like because it's so it's such a weird shape and it's the wrong size for my head. I mean, it's super comfortable, but it's big. It's very big, and it obviously needs some it it needs some work. Oh dear. But it got me thinking about a hat I made a few years ago. I read a book. It was one of those historical knitting books. It was like Richard brought history of hand knitting, right? Isn't this ridiculous? Or like Knitting in America or one of those like historical ones. It might have been Knitting in America. I'm going to take this off now. I feel ridiculous wearing that hat. Here we go. Maybe this will be better. There we go. My name is Kelly. Today I'll be your knitting instructor, teaching you what not to do. So there's this, and of course I don't have the book here, but there was this hat pattern in there called I want to say Tomton. I don't know that's wrong because that's an Elizabeth Zimmerman like baby jacket pattern. I will remember the name of this pattern and find it. But this is the earliest. There's somewhere in a museum. There's the example of the extant knitting pattern. It was like the earliest example of hats worn like a actual hat worn by early pioneers in America in like the 1600s or something. And if you happen to remember the name of this, please do tell. It'll come to me, I know, as soon as I'm done tonight, but it's been a long day. So, but what's interesting about this is that it's not like what we would have normally today with like, 1.5 inch of ribbing and, some nice sleek and maybe with a pom-pom on the back. It's not that way. And so it's big and it's purposely what's the book? I think it's Knitting in America. If it helps, I think it's about like this big, and it might have a picture of illustrations, like historical illustrations and social history of American knitting. That's probably it. Yeah, I have that one too, and eventually I'm sure I'll pull something from it. But there's this hat pattern there, and it's a couple people have like recreated it from the pictures and that they've extracted from the museum website or whatever, and they posted their interpretation of the pattern on Ravelry. And so this hat is interesting because you start here and you knit up, and there's decreasing along it's mostly like in this section, and then once you get to like 8 or 12 stitches, you don't you bind them all off, And then so you've got all of your stitches bound off, and you take this little, um, bit of yarn and you, like, wind, 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 and then you sew it in. And so this little button thing at the top is actually the cast off or the bind off edge of all your stitches. And the purpose, I think the reason it's so tall is to have it, like, more room at the top for, like, warm air. So you finish off the top with this little, this little nubby thing, and then you go back down to the edge here, and you pick up and knit, like, this extra hem. And I think this is not ribbed, this is just, like, extra knitting. But you pick up and then, like, I forget if you pick up here and then attach it here, or pick up here and attach it here, but it's like a double thick, um, hem sort of a thing. And then there's, like, the little loop, so you can pull it down. Works better without glasses. Hats look better without glasses, for me at least. You can pull it down nice and snug. And so the whole idea of having, like, a really big, like a tall cap to have extra warm air up there, I think is interesting. We don't, in our culture today, we don't really wear hats like that so much. At least, maybe not the general population. I'm sure some people do. But, like, when I put this on, I think, it would look like, I feel like I should have dreadlocks or something to, like, tuck in there. Like, it's loosey goosey, which is cool. It's an aesthetic. It's not Monmouth hat. Yes, Karen, that's it. Monmouth hat. That's right. And I'll put a link to that in the show notes, because it's an interesting construction and it's a free Ravelry pattern. Yeah. But this is just very different than what I was expecting. So maybe instead of, like, beating myself up over the fact that, like, my my hats aren't turning out the way that I expect them to, maybe I should just go with it and, like, I can start a trend. I don't know. Oh gosh. So, if I ran into you on the street and I was wearing this hat, would you take me seriously? Better yet, would your non-knitting family members take me seriously if they ran into me on the street and I was I was wearing this hat? Oh dear. I don't know. Maybe I'll just fold it and add a pom-pom and call it good. So, I've been making about one of these a week. So this time, next week, stay tuned. I'm gonna try again for the 4th time. The first hat, I agree. I'm gonna try again. This I found that when I wear this, my husband said, "That looks like a chemo cap." It's like, "Thank you." I don't know. Um, this has, I think, 6 inches of negative ease, and I did some checking into, like, what hats should be, and I think a normal hat, it didn't say, like, what gauge of, what weight of yarn, or normal, what weight of yarn or gauge of knitting it should be, but it said an adult hat usually has 2 inches of negative ease, and this has a whopping 6 inches of negative ease if I'm wearing it. And I measured my head. My head's 21.75 inches. And this is, I don't have my tape measure here, but I think, so 21.75 is pretty close to 22, which divided by 2 is 11. So this is like 10 and a half inches. No, it's not 10 and a half inches. It's like 9 inches across. So this has a lot more negative ease than it would normally. And so I wanted to see what would happen if I wore this out for a while, because I finished it and I was so proud of it. I had to wear it out on a walk through the neighborhood. And over the course of my walk through the neighborhood, just kept going up. And this is about the point it was when one of my neighbors stopped to talk to me. So I think this size would be better on a smaller person. And Karen says to put a ribbing on that smaller hat, use 2 strips and add ribbing. On the front here, you can easily just drop 2 stripes. But because of the way this hat is shaped, it's like diagonal on the edge. And so for hat number 3, I did drop a couple of stripes, and I made this one shorter, and it's ribbed all the way around. And so I had to kind of redo my chart a bit to get that. But I did, and I like that. I think I'm headed in the right direction now. I just need to add some more crown shaping so that this looks a little bit less like a shower cap. And it wouldn't hurt if I use the correct size of needle. But it's nice. I could, maybe if I steam blocked it, I would wear that out. Yeah, probably not to a fancy dinner, but I would wear that out. Yeah, so we talked about our knit along. How far are some of you? Have you, I know Karen is cast on. Has anyone else cast on, or do you have any questions about the pattern or the knit along or anything? Or anything in general for number knitting that you're curious about? Oh, Dion wants to know, how long is the knit along? Well, we were thinking through the end of February. And because this is pretty small, like this whole YouTube live group thing is kind of new. Well, it's new to me. This is the 4th one. We don't have like 1,000 people participating. I mean, I wish we did, maybe in time. But right now it's just, a handful of us. Even though couple dozen people have downloaded the pattern, I did make a Ravelry thread about it. If you wanted to post some pictures there, and I also had a hashtag, and I'll put that all down in the show notes today. I don't know if I remember to do that last week for this week's video. So yeah, till the end of February. And if you don't finish by the end of February, that's okay. I think in time we'll do prizes and that sort of thing, but we're just not quite there yet. But that would be the goal, end of February. And if that's too soon of a time for you to do like a full blanket, you can, change your box number and make a pot holder. Make 2 of them, stitch them together, throw it on the washing machine, make yourself a pot holder. My favorite pot holders are ones that I made myself, and I can't even use store-bought pot holders anymore because the ones I make are so much better. So you can make yourself a pot holder, and that counts too. Yes, Dion, I am recording the lives. I have noticed though, if you just go to the Knit Swag channel, for some reason they have the content, and it's like all the, little tutorial videos I made and all the stuff that wasn't live that I was just like trying to, sit by myself in front of the camera and talk. Those show up under content or maybe videos, but the live has its own tab. And so if you look in the live tab, you'll see them all there. Oh, great. Thanks, Andrew. I'm glad you like the plan. Yeah, it's fun. Another thing I didn't mention that I don't think is on here is these little, it might be a little hard to see, these little squirrely red things. They're like a little curlicue with a slash through it. That means break yarn. In case it wasn't obvious as a knitter, the little broken swirly red thing means break yarn, and the little, I think there's a couple on here. This teeny little green line, I think there's another one there. That means that that's where you start the yarn. And there's also some other abbreviations on there for CO is cast on, B, is there bind off? I don't know if bind off is on here. PK means join by knitting. JK means pick by knitting. Yeah, because I did this chart before I started including the key down at the bottom. So that's why that's not on there. Yes, changing the, yeah. Oh, Helen says, can we change colors for 2, 3, and 4? Sure. Uh-huh. 2, 3. Yeah. Yeah, that's fine. You know, here's another thing that I thought about this week that I didn't mention last week. Tropical leaf, where are you? If any of you happen to know what page Tropical Leaf Car Throw is on, it's on the printout. If you have the pattern printed out, I'm going to have to look it up real quick. And it has to do with like how you handle switching yarn from unit to unit. So Tropical Leaf Car Throw, page 146. Here we go. All right. Unit 1 is a double wing unit. So in case you don't know how to knit a double wing unit, you're going to cast on, work back. Every odd row, you're going to increase 1 here, decrease 2 here, and increase 1 right there. That's a double wing unit. And then she says, cast off on the 32nd ridge. So here's another thing I'm changing about this. So I'm knitting this whole unit. I've got all my live stitches on the needles. She's telling me bind them all off and then pick them up again with gray. And can like every single unit, she has you bind off. And I'm not going to do that. And I think she has you do that because she has a lot of, I don't know, a lot, but at least probably a half a dozen places in the book where she has you bind off your units and then like pick up for the next unit. I don't exactly know why. It might be because it adds like an extra bit of, because a bind off edge is always going to be a little bit tighter. And so if you've got those going in multiple directions, your bind off edges, it's going to add some structure to the blanket that maybe wouldn't otherwise be there. So yeah, so here's the picture from the book. So I'm just, when I'm done with, unit 1, I'm just going to keep on knitting. I'm not going to bind off. I'd be curious if any of you bind off and then just pick up all the stitches, but that seems like an extra step to me. So I thought I should clarify this. Even though I love this book, there are some things that I like to tweak as I go. Yeah, so I'm excited to see what you make. Someone did mention last week that when they printed out their pattern, the actual chart of it printed out in green. And that's because in the actual chart, there's green, there's green hiding in there. And so if you have that issue, I think it has to do with your PDF reader. So I would open the file in Adobe Reader, which is free, and there won't be any green visible. And so you can just print it out and then color it in. It's like a blank coloring chart. So that's how you can avoid the green. Karen says, I was thinking to bind off on the first 32 stitches, knit across, and then bind off the last bunch. Bind off, knit across, and then bind off in the last bunch. I would, oh, I see. Is that because you want to get your, so if you do your double wing, is that because you want to get your yarn in the right place for this one? I'm thinking that's probably why. I would just not bind off unless you want that extra structure. I don't know why you'd like bind off some and not the rest of them. Because if on one side you bind off like on the, the front side of the work, and then on the other half of it, you bind off on the back side of the work, you're going to have like an unequal number of ridges. So like you'll only have worked half of the ridge. And so the two sides of the work, they're not going to match. So I would just totally ignore that section about binding off. Forget about it. Just keep on working. She, as you know, her instructions are not the clearest. And so like for this one, I don't even refer to the pattern. I just refer to the chart. And a lot of the patterns in the book are like that, especially the blankets. You can just look at the chart, knit it how you want. Once you got your stitch count and you're good to go, and you don't have to worry about all these extra instructions. She tries to explain it, I think, a little bit too much sometimes, but in doing so, she makes it more confusing. Yeah. Don't bind off. We could hold a poll. Who wants to bind off after unit 1? Nobody so far. Yeah. How do you all feel about the chain stitch edging on the sides? Because all of her stuff uses a chain stitch edging. You always slip the first stitch, purl the last stitch. I know I've done enough test knitting. Well, I've had enough test knitters work these patterns that like that thing is kind of a sticking point. Like some people from the get-go are like, no, there's this ugly line. That's what one lady referred to it as. There's this ugly line that I don't like. And Virginia referred to it as a beautiful chain stitch outline. You see how there's chain stitches going everywhere to outline the units. And I like it, but I know a lot of other people don't. And all the other, garter stitch aficionados, such as these folks and this, and I think I've looked at a bunch of Stephen West patterns. He doesn't do chain stitch edging either. And I know Vivian Hawksborough also does a lot with garter stitch geometric stuff. I don't think she does chain stitch edging either. I love it personally, but I know not everybody does. It does make, I've noticed that the chain stitch edging on the, where is it? All right, so we got, can you see that? Yeah. So this is the divided triangle, and this is the flat edge, because this is where you cast on. And this would be considered the rising edges. And so these rising edges, because they're like on a 1.4 ratio, the chain stitches are 1.4 times bigger. And so when you pick up from this bias edge here, these chain stitches look just a touch different, like 1.4 times different than from the other edge. So maybe that's why people don't like it, because it doesn't totally match, because it's different proportions. But I like the chain stitch edge, and the difference in the bias line doesn't matter to me. I think it's fine. Anyway, as usually happens about 7:05 on a Sunday night after a live stream, my voice is hoarse. It's getting stronger, but as I've mentioned before, I work for myself, by myself. And so talking with you all on Sunday night is probably the most talking I do all week. So my voice is generally weak. So I should, unless you all had any other questions or commentary to go over today, I should probably sign off tonight, and we can pick it up again next Sunday night. Any other questions for me? I'm really glad that you all came. I look forward to this every week, and I know I can't see you all in person, but this is very fun for me. So thanks for coming, and I will see you all next week. All right. Thanks, ladies and Andrew. Bye.